Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today for the very first author interview is an author I am super excited to have here on the show. Now, my guest today writes dark romance with a strong emotional core, stories where characters come first, choices are messy, and love shows up at the worst possible time. Fueled by a caffeine addiction and the particular spite of a millennial who has survived an unreasonable number of unprecedented events, reading and writing have always been her place of comfort and escape. A New England native, she lives with her husband and two children who keep her grounded in love, humor, and the beautiful chaos of everyday life. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us give a huge round of applause to our guest today, Kara Poland, otherwise known as K.E. Poland. Kara, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here, Kara, and to learn all about your stories and your upcoming book, which is in October, you said, correct?
Yes, October 1st.
Which is also the month of my birthday, too. So that is pretty awesome.
Nice Halloween birthday.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Kara, I understand that you want to keep a lot of the secrets of the books under wraps until closer to the release date. I definitely respect that. But as a teaser for our viewers and listeners, what can people expect from this book of yours?
So I like to describe it as Ozark if the core of Ozark were an enemies to lovers story. So it's very much that ordinary people dragged into organized crime feel, but at the heart of it, it's truly a romance.
Nice. I like it. I absolutely like it. Now, before we dive further into, the creation of the book, and I'll try to make sure the questions are not too spoilery as possible, let's talk a little bit about you, Carl, for a second. So, as a little icebreaker, what's a random fact about you that people would not expect?
Oh my gosh. Well, I grew up Wiccan. So I feel like people who know me would definitely expect that because I'm very witchy, but I feel like that's a little unorthodox fact. Not many people grow up in a pagan household. Many people wind up finding Wicca or witchcraft as adults. But I grew up like that. So
okay.
Very eccentric little family.
Nice. Very, very nice. So, also from your bio, you love to tell stories that have, again, a deep emotional core to them. So, I'm very curious. If we go back in time a little bit to your origins, what would you say was the definitive or a series of definitive aha moments that really sparked this creative passion for the written word?
The first time I ever started writing stories was in second grade because I had a really hard time learning how to read early on in elementary school and had, like a special education plan. And I wrote like a couple little, I was 7, like little kid stories. And my teacher would give me one of those little blue ribbons because she was just so excited that I did writing because I struggled so much. And that was the first little thrill of like, oh, I get a little like reward for writing this story. And then I would say fast forward to middle school, high school, wrote a ton of poetry. I have so many notebooks of like half finished books that I would write as a teenager that never quite completed. And then role play was huge for me as a teen. The kind where it's almost like a pass along story online. So someone might start it as a character like, oh, I'm at the bar, blah, 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 blah. And then you could join in as another POV character somewhere in that scene. And you would just kind of write back and forth and this story would sort of unfold between you and other people could join. You could have like a ton of people all writing this collective thing. I used to do that a lot in high school. And that was really fun. And so those experiences were sort of my first writing, creative, I've always definitely been a person who dissociates a lot and kind of like, not in a bad way, but in a like, oh, I'm like in this whole other world right now and get pulled back kind of
All
thing.
right, all right. And I will just say, Carl, you definitely made me think of a memory since, as you brought up, the RP stories, because I
Yeah.
also used to do that as well. I was actually part of an Assassin's Creed RP stories group on Google's Facebook, their version way back in the day, when
Wow.
they
That's
still
cool.
had that Google Meet, not Google Meets, but it was an old feature that Google used to have where you could actually share pictures. It was their version of
Oh,
Instagram and Facebook, but man, I remember I would just wait and I would just wait for a friend who would just say, I need the next story. Come on, come on.
yeah.
So we would have
For
like,
someone to jump in with you. And
yeah,
then
oh my
sometimes people
gosh.
stop responding and you get sad because your story dies.
Yes, oh my gosh. And then we would have like hundreds of emails. I think the one story we finished was like in total like 500 emails, just this
Mm,
one story. And funny enough, it actually became a really popular fan fiction that I then rewrote and shared it. It was Assassin's Creed World at War, which follows the main character who discovers his wife is a Templar agent, and he is thrust into the war between assassins and Templars, and also has to fight Hitler and the
gosh.
Nazi regime.
Wow. Yeah, that must have been fun.
It was, oh my gosh, that just brought me
Yeah.
back to many fun
I
memories.
definitely, I got my roots in fan fiction and role play for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? This actually brings up a question that one of my commenters actually sent me in a message privately, and they would actually like to hear this because they've noticed that there have been a lot of authors that I've had on the show who have said that they also dabbled in fan fiction as well. And sort of like as a kind of like a fun fan question, Carl, where do you think like fan fiction plays a role in an author's journey?
I think fan fiction plays a huge role in an author's journey because I think many of us started that way as kids,
Hmm.
right? Like these are, when you're a kid, it's harder to come up with a whole new world, but you can make stories within the world that you know. And you're so passionate about that world too, because that's your whole focus as a kid. You don't have all these other responsibilities and stuff. And so I think with your imagination's richer too. And I think a lot of authors start there, writing in their favorite places, but making their own adventures.
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. And speaking of adventure, let's now talk about the lead up to your book. So let's fast forward a little bit. So when you got the idea for this Ozarks with a little bit of romance intermixed in, how did the title come about? Because I'm always very intrigued of how the titles
Mm,
of stories play a huge role in what readers can expect.
yeah. So when I was in undergrad, my major was psychology. So almost all of my courses were more on the scientific end, less creative. But, when you're getting a degree, they make you do like extra electives and you can kind of pick what you want.
Right.
So, having always been a creative person and wanting to mix it up, I chose there was an entire course on Dante's Inferno by
Ooh.
one of my favorite professors who I had also taken 2 Shakespeare courses with prior to that. So I took this Dante class. The entire semester was just Inferno. And I loved it. I loved how passionate the professor was about it. This man, his doctorate is in Shakespeare, which is wild to me that you can have an entire doctorate in such a niche. I think that's the coolest thing ever. But the way that he taught Inferno was really inspiring to me. So when I wrote this book, I wanted to thread themes from Dante's Inferno within my plot in a way that they could kind of go together. So that's where the second half of the title, the Inferno part, comes from.
Mm,
Is the parallel with Dante. Also, there's like a lots of fire themes in the book too.
right.
The first half, so the book's title is Freedom's Inferno. The freedom comes from, a lot of the underlying themes in the novel as well, which have to do with the concept of freedom and whether or not it's actually attainable with the
Mm.
society that we have. Like, do you really freely make your own choices, or is a lot of it socially constructed or having to do with circumstances or government or whatever it is? Like, how free are we actually? And also, more metaphorically, with freedom, like the freedom to be yourself, the freedom to do whatever, just plays a huge role in it. So I just pretty much took the two big things and stuck them together and thought it sounded good.
All right. I like it. I like it. And as you began writing this book, ultimately for you as the author, Carl, what was the promise you're making, not just to yourself, but also your readers? But also, what was the mentality going into this book? Since this is, I assume this is like your first published book that you are uh, releasing in October, the first of many, I
Mm,
imagine.
I hope so. Yeah, I had written a manuscript prior that I actually did self-publish, but like not the proper way. It was more like I slapped it up on Amazon, didn't do anything else. And then a couple
Right.
months later, I unpublished it because I was like, what have I done? And I just like pulled it off. So this is actually my second manuscript. But I feel like I got off track there for a sec. What is my promise to the readers? I think first and foremost, with reading being a huge escape for myself, and I think for many others, I wanted to build something that would be entertaining, fast paced, immersive, that you can disappear into it and be on an adventure of your own. And like, I'm doing something that's not my real life now, and I'm enjoying it. And just to have fun with it. But also, underneath that, if you're the type of person who enjoys finding the deeper literary elements to something, like metaphors or themes that are maybe you have to dig for, that would be there too. So, I'm very particular about the actual words that I use when I write, and that matters to me. And so being able to see how something's written and make a connection and kind of go like, holy shit, like, to be able to do that, but also to just be able to read it and have fun and enjoy it and not think too much.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. Now let's talk a little bit some fun little questions. These are some fan questions that I've gathered over the years from my followers and my fans who have sent me messages. And this one part particular, these are two parts, focus on characters. Now, this may border into spoiler territory, Carl, so give as much or as little as you like. So we'll start with the first question, which is a nice little icebreaker into your style of world building. So, how did you write the characters, not
Mm.
only the main love interest, but the side characters as well, to the point that they were not caricatures or thematic characters that felt like real individuals that we would meet in our real life, but also make sense for the world that they exist in?
Mm. That's a hard question to answer because I feel like my characters are in charge of themselves in the strangest way. Like, I went into writing this having a very different idea of what the romantic dynamic would be like. Originally, it was going to be the actual romance was going to be a lot darker and more like, I don't know, a lot darker, not what it is now. But then as I started writing, it was like, oh no, Charlie wouldn't do that. Or like, that's not how
Mhm.
they would be. And I can't necessarily explain to you why that is, other than my brain just knew these people already. So that's part of it. I think I also, writing is therapy for me too. And so a lot of my internal struggles go into my characters as well. Maybe traits that I struggle with in myself, or like a core belief that causes me difficulty. And now I'm going to give it to my character and I'm going to see what they do with this.
Absolutely. So it almost seems like to me that something that's a recurring theme on the show is that for some authors, they are the type of authors who allow the characters to tell the story as opposed to the author sort of taking the reins. And it's a very interesting because for me, for my own take on storytelling, just like you, I would think of like, well, would he actually do that? I don't know.
Mhm.
Even though I created the characters, I could easily change the whole outlook of them to suit the story. But then you realize, well, will that actually help the story along? Will that actually help the character? So it is very, very fascinating. And that kind of leads into the next question, which again may kind of border on spoilers, Car. So, of all the characters that will be presented in your book, who was your favorite to write? And which
Mm,
character caused you the most grief in terms of fleshing them out?
yeah. So this is actually a character that is not in this book, but will be
Mm,
in the next one.
okay.
So this book is a part of it's going to be a 3-book series, but they're interconnected standalone. So you could read them in any order and it won't affect you. Um, and this character is in the next one that I'm going to be writing. I think you hear about him for about half a second in this one, just a character saying something to another, but you probably wouldn't realize that they were talking about him. His name is Luca, and he's my favorite because for me, his POV is the most fun for me to write in a lot of
Mm,
ways, but he's also caused me the most pain because he is by far like the most internally tortured of my characters, but also I think
right.
he has a lot of really like the things from deep down in my like vault that I don't go into with myself, if that makes sense, come out
Hmm.
in him. And so he really forces me to look in the mirror with myself too. And his storyline, there's going to be a lot of feelings there for folks when we get there.
Nice. All right. I like it. I like it. Now, this next question, again, I'm going to tweak it a little bit. And it's more focusing on, reviews and feedback. So, again, I'm going to tweak this question just a little bit. So, as you were writing, I imagine there were probably maybe some points in the journey, in the process of writing the story from like, the first draft to the final draft that we will see when it releases in October, that there may be some moments of hesitancy of, do I tell people about this or do I tell them about it when it releases? Because I've told a lot of authors over the past, I want to say the start of this year and maybe even last year, that there's a hesitancy to tell people that you are an author, despite the fact
Mm,
that we see, a big rise in indie authors, and unfortunately, as we will touch upon later, the rise of AI generated
mm,
books as well. And even when you tell people that you are an author, it's when you're telling them you're either a hybrid or a small person or indie author, the reactions could be mixed depending on the
yeah.
person. But if you tell them that you're a trad author with like a big name like Simon Schuster, Macmillan, or Penguin Random House, it's entirely different.
Mm,
So for you, Cara, when did you tell your friends and family that you were embarking on this new journey? And after telling them, what the story is going to be about, as well as the whole series, what was the reaction like? Was it 50-50 split, more positive, or
mm.
more critical?
Well, I'm fortunate in that none of my friends or family have ever been critical towards me about it. I've certainly never gotten negative feedback. I think I've had a range from just not giving a shit to like being excited for me, basically. So the worst responses I've received are from family members who just don't have a response at all, really. Like it's just like, oh, cool, let's move on. And it's like, oh, okay. Like I guess I won't talk about my thing anymore, like that face. But for the most part, I so a couple, my mom and my husband and then my best friend Kelsey all knew pretty much right away when I first started writing because they're the closest to me. And also, um, my mom and my best friend were reading it as I was writing it. So for me, it's really important to have it. I've written 3 books now. each time I need to have one person read it chapter for
Mm,
chapter as I write it, or I swear I will never finish it. I think it's really that accountability of like, well, they started reading it. If I don't finish it now, I'm an asshole type of thing. So those three knew right away, and they were my biggest supporters. Once I had a, you know, drafted it enough times that I was actually querying it to agents and that sort of thing. Probably maybe a couple more friends were just aware that I was doing that, but not really having a much of a reaction. And then for like everybody else, my extended family, they didn't know until I had a publishing deal.
right.
And then it was the same thing where some people thought that was the coolest thing ever. Other people were like, meh.
All right, all right. I feel you. I feel you. And we're actually going to be touching on the marketing side and the business side of being an author very, very soon, because that's probably one of my favorite segments in the interview. But before we go on to that, we're now going to shift gears a little bit, and we're now going to talk about another big one that a lot of people do love, and that's, of course, what does it mean to be an author in the digital age? In essence, what
Mm,
is our why? So let's start with the first question, which I should warn you, Cara, is a very, very loaded question. It's a lot to unpack. So the reason I've been love doing this show is, after 8 years of, interviewing authors as well as narrators, editors, and other people in the publishing industry, I've seen a trend that's been shifting. We've now seen, as I mentioned earlier, a startling rise in indie authors and indie creatives. And it's interesting that if you look back 20 years ago, being an indie and, promoting as an indie was very, very difficult. It's still
mm,
difficult now, don't get me wrong, but we have, the rise of social media, which has helped a lot of indie authors and small press authors and hybrid authors. But the conception was if you were self-published or indie or hybrid, you were seen as a lesser form of
mm,
publication. We can't say that now because there are many books that are created by indies and small press authors that are exceptional, but we can also point out that there are probably some books that are professionally published
mm.
by one of the big fives, and they may be missing a few editor checkups now and then, if you get my
Yeah.
meaning. And again, going back to social media, which is a huge tool, it's a double-edged sword. It can
Mm,
heighten our imposter syndrome. It heightens our writer's block, and we leave ourselves exposed to the World Wide Web. And some authors are
mhm.
very private. They're very private people. They may even have like a different persona when they write their books. They don't want attached to themselves. It's a lot that goes into being an author now in the digital age. So ultimately, Car, my question to you is this: what has still disciplined you to not only write stories, but write the stories that you want to showcase, to promote
Mm.
your voice? In essence, what is your why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it it's part of my what makes me happy. Like it's a job, but it's also my hobby or my passion is I love being in my head and creating these stories and writing them down and making something fun and interesting. And of course, I think all authors have somewhat of an ego. That feedback when it's good feels nice. The feedback when it's bad feels terrible, but it helps you
Yes.
grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think my why is ultimately for myself because I enjoy it and it makes me feel good and it's fun. It's hard, but it pushes me and it gives me something to do. You know, I mean, I'm busy as hell, but it's something. It's a change of pace. And as far as writing what I want to write and being disciplined about that, I just don't think I could write something that I didn't want to write if I tried.
Yes, very true. Very, very true. Now, Carl, this next question is one that I've gotten a lot and people really enjoyed. And this may be a little bit more on the personal side. But as mentioned in your bio, that not only you are an author, you're also a wife, you're
Mm,
also a mother. And the one thing that I've noticed, and a lot of people have said this on the show previously, is that for some who got into this business as being authors, they didn't do this for money, for the followers,
mm,
or for anything. They did it for one simple reason, which is not a lot of people are reading. We have a very, very high literacy rate in the United States, which shouldn't be even a notion, shouldn't even be
mm,
conceivable, and yet we do. And the reason I bring this up is something that a previous guest on the show said is that if there's one thing I want to achieve in my life, no matter if I don't make a lot of money, or I'm not as famous, or I'm not as popular, it is this. I want my book to be the book that gets somebody back into reading,
yeah.
because we've had a lot of people we've known in our personal lives who were readers, but they stopped reading. And that could either because the books may not have really hooked them in, or the stories themselves were not good, or there's been a shift in storytelling. It's a lot of things. So, Kara, I would like to hear your thoughts on this very
Mm,
personal subject, not only as an author, but also as a parent.
mm. Yeah. I think a lot of people stop reading when they get out of high school because of the burnout. There's a huge push for college. Like, you have to go to college, you have to go to college, whether you're cut out for college or whether that's what you want or not. I think a lot of
Mhm.
us wound up kind of feeling like that was the only option. And I think that is what kills the love of reading, is that time. Really, I think it's college, which I know is terrible, but that's what it was for me, because I used to read a book in 2 days in high school. I would go through several a week. I would be up late reading, and then college happened and I didn't read for 10 plus years after college. And it was the same thing till someone, actually, my friend, mailed me the Akatar book without
Mm.
telling me. She just Amazoned it to my door. So then I opened it and I was like, well, I guess you want me to read this. And now I'm obligated to, because you sent it to my house and you bought it for me. And that was what got me back into reading. But as a parent, my own daughter, she struggles with reading. She has an IEP and we're working on that. We read every night right now the Junie B. Jones series, which she likes.
Yes.
And I read as a kid too. And there's one called The Princess in Black that she really likes too. She's in second grade. And so I make sure we're reading every single night to try to get her there. And I would be so sad if she didn't wind up reading for pleasure and kind of being, because I just think it's so special, and that she would love it if she could get there. And I'm sure she will. So yeah, it is concerning as a parent, but I think as parents, encouraging our kids to read and even making it mandatory, even though that's not fun, but with prizes, rewards, whatever, is how we kind of fight against that. Is you have to make it a priority rather than just being like, oh, whatever, he doesn't want to read. Or, it's
Absolutely.
like, no, it's not an option. You're going to read for just 20 minutes. That's all. I'll take you to, because, we buy our kids tons of crap all the time, right? But honestly, if you want to go to the bookstore, I'll buy you whatever book you want, as long as it's appropriate for your age.
Oh, yes.
But I'm never going to say no. Let's go to the bookstore. Can I get a new book? Of course. I think that's what parents can do. Get your kids excited about it. Find the books that they like.
Yes. Well said, Carl. Well said. And that kind of leads into the next follow up question, which I kind of teased at in the beginning, and that is the rise of generative, artificially created books. Now, I'm sure you have seen on your feed, Carl, as a fellow
Mm,
author, the talks of generative AI. And looking back on it now, you know, AI is going to be here to stay. We've
mhm,
opened Pandora's box. We can't get rid of it. And, we should fight against AI in any way we can, because, there's a lot of things of, the environment and what it's doing to communities. Absolutely so. But when you look at the creative side, I think we should push for that even more. is because we're seeing now artificially created books being pushed into the marketplace
Mm,
that have no business being there. And unfortunately, I have talked to a lot of friends who have said that they have been unfortunately been caught in the witch hunts of their books
mm,
being labeled as artificially created, or the cover was created with AI. I know a lot of people have had to go on social media and actually do a live coloring session or a live session with their
mhm.
editors and narrators. It's a lot. And again, we can talk about AI in a whole separate
Yeah,
episode in and of
yeah.
itself, but going back to generative AI, it has no business in the creative sphere because you're not really writing, you're programming.
Mhm.
And to say we're against AI, we can't really say that either because spell check and
Yeah,
everything like
it's
that,
in
that's AI.
literally everything in one way or another.
Absolutely. So we have to take a stand on using AI as a tool as it's intended rather than a shortcut to make something,
Mhm.
which, again, going back to literacy, that also that also puts a big issue on reading because
Mhm.
AI
You
is
have
not
to
going to
think for
spell
yourself.
check. It's not
Yeah.
going to correct itself. We have to do that. We are the editors. So ultimately, my question to you is this, Cara. What would be sort of like your piece of advice for authors who may be going
Mhm.
through this or may find it deflating? It's like, how can I compete with someone who may be using a program to pump out 20 books? Because
Mhm.
as we've seen in social media, there have been authors that have outright said they have used a program of some kind to publish 20 books. And that doesn't really help the scholarship. That doesn't really
Yeah.
help the craft of writing. It doesn't really do anything. So I would like to hear your thoughts on this question, which is impacting all creatives, not just
Mm.
authors.
I mean, I don't think ultimately there's nothing you can do about competing with it. I don't think you really are competing with it because it might make 20 books and then perhaps that person is making a fair amount of money off of those 20 books, but are any of those 20 books going to wind up as bestsellers? Are any of those
Mm,
20 books going to be books that years from now are taught in school or that
yeah,
people look at for having literary merit? Probably not, because that level of craft is just not going to be achieved with AI. Like, I'm sure, you know, with AI art, for example, I often can't tell if it's AI or not. I'm sure there are some AI books that you can't tell necessarily, but I still don't think that it would create a breathtaking book.
right. Absolutely. That is very well said. Very, very well said. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to each individual author's best judgment.
Mm,
And the industry is constantly changing. It's constantly fluctuating between, being totally against AI or maybe allowing some leeways with AI. It's just a lot. It is absolutely a lot. And that kind of
mm,
now segues into my favorite segment, which is the business side of being an author. Now, Cara, as you mentioned, of course, as you were querying this book and trying to get a publishing deal, how much research did you really do to really find the publishing house that really set well for you and would be an appropriate house to, market your book, or your book would be an appropriate addition to that publishing house? Because I don't think a lot of people take into account that certain publishing houses, when they do open calls, they're
mm.
only accepting certain books and they have a certain expectation.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I queried small publishers, I always went to their website and looked at what they were accepting for submissions, genres, all of that. Some of them are transparent around like what the royalty share is and whether or not there's going to be an audiobook or whether or not they put money into marketing. Some of them don't list that at all. So you just have to kind of go off of obviously going on the Google and making sure they're not showing up on Writers Beware or anything like that.
Oh,
Like, I would
yes, that was
definitely,
for writers
yeah,
beware.
I would check that before I submitted. Like, is this place, popping up red flags on Reddit or Writers Beware or anything? Do people say anything positive about them? Oftentimes, you wouldn't see anything when it comes to small pubs. Well, it would either be Writers Beware or it would be nothing. There's not a whole lot of information. So it's just kind of like, all right, they take my genre. There's nothing negative about them. Let's submit. And so I would do that for small presses. And how I wound up with Lark and Lore is they were the first ones who moved really quickly. So I did have another press that I had a full out with several presses. I had a much better response when I started applying to or submitting to presses rather than agents. So I did have full requests with agents, but I had much more with the small presses. So I did have several fulls out, and then I had one that was doing a revise and resubmit. But when I sent my full to Lark and Lore, their owner read it in like a night. So she just moved quick. Like she had emailed me and said, I think it was the first 5 chapters that was their submission. And she was like, oh, hey, can you send me, like, I like what I've read so far. Can you send me the full manuscript? I sent her the full manuscript. And I think it was the next night. It was like a Friday night that I sent the manuscript. And it was like Saturday night or Sunday morning. I think it was at night. It was like Saturday night, I think. She emailed me and was like, I devoured it. Can we set up a Zoom? And so honestly, part of how I wound up with them is that she moved quick and she was enthusiastic. And when I met with her on the Zoom call, she had a vision for developmental edits that she thought would work great, that I agreed with. And it was just her excitement, really, that was like, okay, this is, forget the other ones that are sitting on this for months or whatever. Like, this is a person who knows what she wants and is going to take action. I like that. And I appreciate communication. It's really important to me. So I liked that.
That's amazing, Cara. That is absolutely amazing. Now let's talk about something also in the realm of business. Is I think you kind of touched on this before, is understanding our audience. Now, going back to almost like the pitch you gave in the beginning, it's, kind of like the same story as like Ozarks with like couple getting tied into, the mob, but there's also that romance. So just that thing alone, that's a tag alone, the Ozarks. People already have an expectation of how a story like that is supposed to go. But as authors, we don't want to write stories that are totally familiar. We want to be unique, but not too unique where it's going to throw people out on a loop. It's this balancing act. And as I'm sure you'll definitely agree with the age-old saying, every story has been written and rewritten numerous times over. Nothing is original. So for you, as you were writing this book, how did you balance your voice and individuality as the author, but also being mindful of not only the audience you're writing for, but the genre and subgenres you are also writing in?
So I think the genre and the audience came after for me. It was more like, I have this story to tell. This is the story. I'm going to tell it. And then when it was done, it was me looking at this and saying, okay, what genre is this? If that makes sense. Like, what genre have I just written? I did not go into it like, oh, I'm going to write, I guess my technical genre would be like dark romantic suspense. I was not like, oh, I'm going to write a dark romance, so let me structure this in a way that it fits the genre expectations for dark romance. It was totally, I have a story to tell and I'm going to tell it. And then I looked at it after and said, oh, well, I guess I just wrote a dark romance. And as far as, I guess, audience, I mean, I don't write my story like I need to write this for a particular audience, but probably everything I write is geared definitely towards adults. I only write adult romance. I write spice, so it's going to be adult. But probably naturally, my audience is going to be millennials because I'm a millennial. I draw from the millennial experience so much in everything that I write. Even, the rom-com that I'm querying right now, it's like totally millennial vibes, 100%. And that's just always how I'm going to be. So my audience, I mean, probably older Gen Zs would appreciate it as well. But first and foremost, I'm a millennial. I'm writing from the millennial perspective. My characters are going to be millennials, and that's what you're going to get.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. Now, here's another fun little fan question that I've also gotten numerous times over the years, and it's a two-parter. So we'll start with the first part. What genre do you personally love to read as a reader that you would want to take a stab at and write your own story?
Oh, my favorite genre is fantasy, but I'm way too intimidated to write a fantasy. If I could, I would love that. I would love to be able to create that kind of totally new, unique world with a magic system and all these things that people just lost themselves in, but I probably never would. I don't know. I shouldn't say never. I'm definitely not confident enough to dive into fantasy, but that is my absolute favorite genre.
All right, all right. Here's the next one. Which genre that friends and other authors suggest that you should write in, but you do not feel confident writing in? I'll give an example for me. The one that everyone wants me to write in is historical romance. And it's only for one scene in one of my books, Amintus, Son of Persia. It's maybe like a few paragraphs, and everyone has told me you need to write historical romance because that was the best scene. One of my good friends, she's a narrator, Sophia Dujardin. She read it on camera. She was crying. She
Wow.
couldn't read, and I was like, "Dang!" But I don't read historical romance. It's not my preferred genre. But everybody has constantly told me that I should write historical romance. Is there a genre that everyone says that you would be a good fit, but personally you may feel that I'm not like the right author for that? I think you've almost said like fantasy, but is there another genre that's like a hard no?
Nobody has ever suggested I write any particular genre other than what I already write. But if I had to say there's a genre that's a hard no, it would be sci-fi for me, just because
Mm,
I don't, nothing against people who love sci-fi. It's just not my thing. I don't
right.
like reading, like I'm just not into it. And so I just wouldn't want to write it for that reason.
Absolutely, 100%. There are a lot of genres that are out there that are just so inviting, so enticing, but really have to think of, am I a good fit? And this actually brings up an old question I had back in the day, which is the notion of the term being a cross genre author, authors who
Mm,
don't stick to one genre. And the reason I bring this up is at the time, there was this notion that if you were a cross genre author, you are not seen as reliable in the sense
mm,
of, oh, you're just going to which genre is popular at the moment. You're not like committing to it to like hone your craft. I would like to hear your thoughts on this discussion, and should people put like a lot of emphasis on being a cross genre author and just say like, I'm just an author that just writes, XYZ?
yeah, I mean, I definitely think that stigma still exists a little bit, which is kind of a shame. I don't think authors should be pigeonholed into one genre at all. And I certainly don't want to do that to myself. It's like you can love more than one thing and do more than one thing. If I'm a soccer player, does that mean I'm not allowed to be a baseball player? Like, it just makes no sense to me. And so, you know, I have my dark romance novels, which is primarily what I write in. But as I said earlier, I'm currently querying a rom-com with paranormal elements, which is totally different. So, and also I have an idea for a horror book that at some point maybe I'll write. I don't know if I'll write it, but it's just like floating around in there. And so I don't think it means that you're not reliable or that you're somehow less quality. I just think, why limit yourself to one category? If you get an idea and it's fun and you're excited about it, write it. And also
Right.
because, kind of going off what I said before, I usually don't write like, oh, I have to write this genre now. I just write a story, and that story is a genre.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, this is a really, really fun question that may be a little difficult initially. And that is, as authors, we are always constantly being inspired by, stories we read growing up as children and those we've read growing up as adults. So, Cara, for you as an author and also as a person, what would you say are the books that really
Mm.
inspired you and have impacted your writing in some shape or form? And who would you say are the major authors or literary figures that you've looked up to or you've always been curious about
Mm.
and have researched them to figure out how they approach storytelling?
So immediately, Carissa Broadbent and Sarah A. Parker. Um, Probably the first time I was like, as an adult, damn, I really need to write something again, was reading The Serpents and the Wings of Night. And it's, yes, the story and the plot is good, but the way Carissa writes is beautiful. And I don't know, like if you're someone who really pays attention to the use of words, I read a line. It was a specific line. I read it and I literally stopped and like kind of did that thing where you put your book down and I was like, I wish I was like, I wish I wrote that. That was so good. And I
Yeah.
think it was something like he smelled like the sky and tasted like falling or something like that. And I was just like, fuck. I just loved it. I don't know. And she writes a lot of things like that are breathtaking. And same with Sarah A. Parker, her lyrical style. It's just beautiful. So the two of them for sure are an inspiration to me, and I love their books. I devour them, but I really listen. um well, I do a lot of audiobooks because I just can't sit still. I really listen to the actual words that they use,
Hmm.
and it's just like perfect.
Absolutely. 100%. For me as an author, the author that I've always admired and loved, and I always love promoting him, is the late Brian Jacques, who wrote the Redwall series. And for anyone who remembers watching the Redwall series, season 1, 2, and 3 on PBS when they used to show it, that was
Mm.
kid version Game of Thrones because
Uh,
everybody that we knew in that show, there was no guarantee they were going to survive. And as I grew older, you had Bernard Cornwell, you had the late Victor Milan, who wrote Dinosaur Princess, which is Game of Thrones meets Jurassic Park, and Alan Smale, Con Ingledon, Vallejo Manfredi. All these authors for me have really shaped my style of writing because I also write a little bit of history, a little bit of fantasy, alternative history, and more. And what I also think is very important to touch on is the community that is very present in the author world. So, Cara, I'd like to give you this opportunity to give a shout out to any fellow authors or any fellow creatives that have helped you on your journey, and even friends and family too, who have also played a special role in your journey as an author.
yeah, this is going to be so many. I have to, okay, so this is going to sound silly, but I'm in, like, I have a group chat, but our names are nicknames that are like really goofy. So sometimes I forget people's actual name because I'm just seeing this really silly and sometimes inappropriate name over and over again. So I like actually have to check what their real name is for a second so that I'm not saying their weird name. Um, oh God, let me just open this. So Kit Shears, and her Instagram is Kit Shears Book Corner. She's been super supportive. She is writing right now and hopes to be an author. I tell her she is an author. And definitely Jolene Tyler, Lena E. Alesti, all wonderful people. Um, Kelly Beck, and I can't remember her agent sister's name. That they both have the same agent. Her name is Rebecca, but I can't remember her last name. Kelly and Rebecca both helped me a lot. early on when I was making a query letter. So I don't know them very well. It was more just like they're authors who are agented and they post a lot and I see it and I kind of like put myself out there and was like, would you mind reading my query letter? And they both did and were both extremely helpful, which is awesome. And I'm trying to find, there's one other agented. Oh, Caitlin Stark is another agented author who's probably on sub right now, who I had done the same thing. She had posted like the I'm newly agented thing. And I was like, oh, she got an agent. I'm just going to send her a weird DM and be like, can you read my query letter? But you know, the book world is great because every author that I've done that to, like, kind of dropped into their DMs and been like, I'm really sorry if this is weird, but like, can you please read this? They all have, and they've all given me helpful feedback and been honest but very kind, which I really appreciate. And I don't want to forget anyone, so I'm really sorry if I forgot you and you talked to me. But basically, everyone in the group chat, the Finer Things Club, we call it after The Office, has been incredible. And Wesley Harper, she as well. Has 3 books out, all taking place on the Oregon coast, and she's great too. So check her out.
Nice. That's awesome. That is incredible, Cara. And before we get to the last 2 questions, I think also to reiterate what you were talking about, Cara, is, the community itself is absolutely amazing. And we grow with these people. I know a lot of people from the outside will believe that the industry is a very cutthroat business. And there may be some truth to that discussion, to that comment. But at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. Because there's no guarantee anyone's book is going to be, as you mentioned before, an overnight success or a New York Times bestseller. Some people just write to write, and others write because they want to build a career, to grow in this industry. But regardless of the choice that each person makes, we're in this business together to help promote each other's works. And I've read so many works from so many incredible people and met so many wonderful, talented individuals, not just authors as well. I want to give a huge shout out to the artists I've also had a chance to meet, the editors who help us fellow authors, and of course, got to give a big shout out to the narrators who bring our stories to life, who fight the good fight against, as we talked about previously, AI and the rise of AI narration. So I want to give a huge shout out to all the creatives I have worked with over the last 8 years or so. And now, Carl, we arrive at the final 2 questions of this incredible author interview. Now, we talked about a lot of things in this episode, which I'm very, very happy for. And I think a lot of people are going to be very pleased as well. At the end of the day, what do you hope people will take away from your book when it releases in October? And secondly, for the young and aspiring writers and authors listening and watching this interview right now, what is your pearl of wisdom to them?
So first, what I hope the takeaway is, I just want to make people feel something. Lana and Chuck, you're going to love them or you're going to hate them, but either way, I don't think you're going to be neutral. I think the biggest high that I get out of reading a book is when it creates intense emotion in me, whether it's like anger and fury at the bad guy or, the situation, or I'm sobbing or I'm kicking my feet. It's that catharsis of like, I think we all hold our emotions so tight lately, especially with everything going on in the world. And we're kind of operating at this like baseline of dulled down a lot. But when you read a book and you have that extreme reaction and you just feel like something was released after, I love that. And I would just love, for a reader to feel something when they read my book. And then pearls of wisdom for new authors, don't shy away from the criticism and the self-improvement. Read craft books. I think the biggest thing that helped me, that I maybe before I did it would have put down or not thought of as like an important thing is reading craft books. Until I read some and was like, oh my God, that was so helpful. That made so much sense. That leveled up my writing in a way that I never thought it would, like Show Don't Tell by Janice Hardy, I think. And that one is incredible. Save the Cat writes a novel. There's so many of them, but I think don't be afraid to also view it not only, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just going to write whatever, but like, no, do the work, read the craft novels, get a critique partner, be told that your writing is shit and this is why, and sit with the pain. It's okay. Be in pain for a day, but then go back and, say, okay, how do I make this not shit anymore? And keep going. But I think the failure, which is really painful as an author, is hugely important for success later. And so I would say my pearl of wisdom is embrace craft books and constantly be improving yourself, and view failure as a necessary evil to get where you want to go.
Beautifully said, Cara. Beautifully said. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude another amazing author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge shout out to Cara for coming on the show, making her official debut. Now, Cara, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? And where can people pre-order a copy of your book?
Yeah, so you can find me, at k.e.poland on Instagram and TikTok. My website is also linked to my Instagram and TikTok. It's just www.kepolandbooks.com. My website has buttons that will link to where you can find the book. It's available for pre-order right now. Also, Larkin Lore Press's website has a link to pre-order the book. And we do have some pre-order incentives going on right now. So if you pre-order now, not only will you automatically get, for print books, it'll automatically be signed and come with 2 art prints and a bookmark if you pre-order it. But every pre-order, if you DM me a screenshot of the order confirmation, you'll be added to my list, because we're going to do some drawings for giveaways when we reach certain pre-order amounts.
Excellent. I'll link all that down below in the description of this video, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to see Cara back on the show in a follow-up author interview or an episode of the Writers Hub, or have her be featured in a roundtable episode for later this year. You know what you have to do. Like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank everyone for joining us for another amazing episode here on the show. A huge thank you to Cara. We wish her the very best with her book's release coming out this October. So very, very excited. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy Friday, everybody, and we'll see you all next week. Until then, a wonderful day.